Thousands of sailors keep an aircraft carrier on the move at sea. But what do those military men and women do when the ship is settled in dry dock? Tonight, we'll show you. This is What Matters. Good evening, I'm Kathy Lewis. Can you imagine what it would be like to command an aircraft carrier, 5,000 individuals at sea, a floating city? Now imagine you're in command of that ship while it's in dry dock, getting the kind of maintenance and repair it needs to make its next voyage. Well, joining us tonight are leaders who know exactly what it's like to have to maintain morale while in dry dock. Captain Billy Hart is the commanding officer of the USS Theodore Roosevelt. Cryptologic technician Tricia Gunny is with us as well, and thanks to both of you for being with us tonight. I have heard it said, Captain, that being in dry dock is a real test of leadership. You sort of think all of that happens on the high seas, and it certainly does, but really being in dry dock is the true test. Would you agree with that?
You know, I'm not going to take anything away from those at sea. That's not an easy job, and they don't get a lot of sleep. But our challenges are different. Yeah. We have sailors that join the Navy to do specific jobs, and when you're in dry dock, they really don't get to use those skills a lot. So we have to employ them and train them and keep them happy with what they're doing. Yeah. So, like I said, a whole different set of challenges.
Well, let's talk about the chronology of that, because how long are you, well, when did you go into dry dock? When did Roosevelt go into dry dock?
We went into dry dock 20 months ago.
Wow,
so over a year and a half ago.
And where is it in dry dock?
So it's up in Newport News, and it's up at the Newport News shipbuilding, which is now Huntington Ingalls Industries.
Yes, exactly.
And so we're up in there sitting on blocks right now, and the nice thing is we're going to float it here very soon.
Oh, that is great.
So put it back in the water.
Yeah, that must feel good then. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's what I'm looking for.
Progress, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so give us a sense of what happens for the ship in this dry dock period.
Well, you know, I always try to explain this. It's difficult without seeing it, but picture a watermelon and hollowing out a watermelon and starting over from scratch.
Really?
With the exception of,
wow.
some of our propulsion plants.
Sure.
The ship is designed to last 50 years. And it's propulsion, it's nuclear power, basically runs out of gas at 25 years. So we pull it in, we refuel it, we update the electronics and radars and basically all the spaces that have, I guess, degraded over 25 years, and out comes a new product that's ready to fight the new wars and do so things around the globe.
This is not just cosmetic, because, as you say, it's about new aspects of fighting new wars. So what sorts of things get the upgrades? I mean, is it new weapon systems, new radar? What is
Kathy,
it?
if you step back 25 years.
That's what I'm just thinking. I mean, so much has
quite
changed.
a time back. Think about 25 years ago, we didn't even have cell phones.
Exactly.
And so you think about all the electronics that we have to upgrade. And not only that, fiber optic. You know, we have thousands and thousands of tons of cable that we've pulled out that 25 years ago was state of the art, and we're replacing it with fiber optic cable, which allows us to communicate better with less resistance, less heat generated on the ship, and most importantly, less weight. You'd think you really wouldn't care about weight on a 90,000-ton aircraft carrier, but weight is a big consideration.
And do you still have, I mean, we said at the top of the show, 5,000, and then, but somebody told me that really, it's really maybe perhaps, those numbers are changing too because of all of the electronics.
They are. Well, and not only that, you know, the air wing has evolved. You know, we used to have about 90 aircraft on the carrier. And now, you know, we don't have that much because technology has advances to the point where a single strike fighter can do what 3 or 4 old bombers used to do. And so we don't have that requirement to support that many aircraft.
So does that mean you have to then reconfigure in some respects the flight deck?
Well, it makes it a little easier on the flight deck.
I guess it does, less crowded.
Because, less crowded. The aircraft aren't parked quite as close when I first started flying.
Right.
But it's still a challenge because, I mean, these are high-powered aircraft and their jet engine is a very dangerous place to work.
Boy, it sure is. And I tell you, if you've ever had the privilege of seeing flight operations, you have, if you thought you respected these young men and women before, you go out and watch that, it will get your attention.
But you know, it's not just the kids on the flight deck.
Absolutely.
You know, you got to remember there might be 100 on the flight deck, but there's about 2,600 that you don't see that are working on the ship, and that doesn't even include the air wing, which is another 2,000 or so
Indeed
folks.
so. And one of those would be cryptologic technician technical Tricia Gunny. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you.
I had to say I did a little bit of double tape because I thought, hold up, Chief Gunny?
Yes.
I mean, because Gunny is something we associate with the Marine Corps.
Yes.
But your last name is G-H-U-N-N-E-Y.
N-N-E-Y.
I'm guessing that you've dealt with that over time,
All the
haven't
time.
you?
Gunny, Gunny, why are you in the Navy? Not in the Marines. You could have been a Gunny, Gunny in the Marines.
Well,
yes.
there is that, and I think that that, regardless of anything else, would be enough reason not to do that, don't you? Really?
Yes.
Yeah. And so why did you choose the Navy? Just curious. I mean, did you always want a career in the Navy? Or?
I did. I wanted to travel. I wanted to experience it. I mean, when you think of Navy, you think of ships, and I wanted to be on a ship.
Really?
So
yeah. What's appealing to you about that?
The traveling.
Traveling,
and the technology, and just knowing. I think I was watching movies like Crimson Tide,
right.
and just seeing the guys and what they did made me want to do that.
And so how did you decide to go into cryptology?
Well, the Navy actually chose that.
They invited you to consider that option, did they?
And I thought, I'm glad they did.
Yeah.
It's a great job. I love it.
Is that what you wanted to do when you came in, or was it an opportunity that you were afforded?
Yes, it
along
was
the
an
way?
opportunity I was given, yes.
Interesting. And so, did you really understand that much of what you would be doing at the outset?
Initially, no, of course not. But once I went to the school and I learned, I'm glad that that's what the Navy.
Pretty cool. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
And so, what is it that you do on a day-to-day basis?
In layman's terms.
Yes, please.
Have you ever shopped online?
Absolutely.
So after you check out the encryption code that comes up.
Yes, this is a security encrypted situation.
That's kind of what we work with, encryption codes, unencrypting, and...
So you make sure that everything is secure?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. That's fascinating. How long have you been in the Navy?
11 years.
And will you continue on, do you think?
Till I breathe no more.
Till you breathe no more?
Yes.
Well, that'll be a long time. So what are your goals? I mean, you want to be in for a long time. Do you want to stay in cryptology? Do you want to do something
I want to become
else?
a command master chief one day.
Command master chief.
Yes.
And so the command master chief is a pretty important person.
Yes, he's the enlisted leader.
And it's a huge responsibility.
It is.
Yeah. Tell us about that relationship between a commanding officer and a command master chief.
It's probably about as close a relationship between, I would say second only to maybe the CO, the commanding officer, executive officer relationship. I meet with the command master chief every single morning, and we talk about the issues. Like you brought up, morale may be a challenge. We talk about it every day,
right.
Just to make sure that we're taking the right steps to keep the sailors employed and keep them forward-looking and moving forward.
And so one of the things you want to do, I suppose, while sailors are in Drydock is to keep them busy.
Right.
And one of the things that you've been doing, which I think is just is so interesting, is getting these sailors out into the community and connecting them in the community. And one of the things we're going to see right now is the visit of the sailors from the Theodore Roosevelt to Lindenwood Elementary School, where they worked with the kids on some of the basic physical requirements for being a sailor.
We're going to rally them up. I'm quite sure we're going to stretch them out, and then we're going to have them line up on the track, and we're going to pair them up with an actual Navy sailor, and then we're going to actually run it.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. For the last 10 weeks, we've been sending a group of sailors to Lindenwood to try to promote the Navy's culture of physical fitness and just encourage, mentor the children, just be an adult role model.
Ready? Always ready. Begin.
Let's go. Go.
I mean, this is a great deal. I mean, I love volunteer work, helping students, just basically, the United States of America, we have so much obesity as far as the statistically being proven. So to be a part of something like this is fantastic. We're giving back into the community and eating healthy and, knowing your nutrition. And that's another thing that we did as well. We not only came out and did physical strictness with them, we also taught them about proper nutrition.
What's in that food pyramid? Why do we even have a food pyramid?
If anybody gets thirsty, it's kind of hot out here. If you get thirsty at any time, don't be afraid to ask for some water. We'll get you something to drink.
I think it's fun. I'm enjoying running with them.
That is wonderful. I keep just remind myself of this all the time. We had the superintendent of Norfolk Public Schools on, I don't know, maybe a couple of months ago, something like that, and he said what would make the biggest difference in the lives of young people is a caring adult, preferably 2 or 3.
Yeah.
That's what's beautiful about that piece.
It keeps, once it gets the sailors out in the community, keeps them busy, and at the same time, maybe teach goal setting, activity, and achievement to the
just
students.
Just giving a role model, somebody to look up to.
Exactly.
Huge difference.
I mean, think about it. The people that are going to be sitting here 20 years from
right.
now, you just saw on that tape, and so
I may be sitting here 20 years from now.
So, but we have to spur on that initiative,
sure.
so they can look and set goals themselves and move up.
It's such a great point. We're talking about what life is like in Drydock for the crew of the USS Theodore Roosevelt. So this is, forgive this sort of basic question, but I know frequently sailors will stay on board the ship. Where do they
Correct.
stay when they're in dry dock?
That's one of the challenges we have. You said it was a floating city, and if you think about that floating city, right now the ship has no services at all. There's nowhere to sleep, nowhere to get your hair cut, nowhere.
So no galley.
No galley. There's everything. So we've got sailors that are staying up in Newport News, some down at Portsmouth Barracks, and obviously others out in the community.
So what do you do? Just rent facilities within the city for them to stay in?
Exactly. And so a lot of them are just barracks. They're military facilities.
Sure.
And so, one of the problems we have is keeping the family together. And it takes a lot. We have a whole fleet of vans that have to go around and make sure that they can get from point A to point B. Because, some of the sailors that come to the ship, they're, 6 months removed from high school. And so, just to make sure that we keep them on the right track and develop them and give them for what they raised their right hand for. And that's our aim.
Yeah, wow, that's fascinating. I wonder, Chief Gunny, as you think about this issue of the age of some of these young people who are coming in, do you remember being that young, and can you go back and sort of put yourself in their shoes?
I do, and when I was that young, I never experienced dry dock. But here, they do a great job of just reaching out to all age groups. They do video game tournaments for those that are into that. Wow. They keep us the competition up with dodgeball tournaments amongst the different departments, and then even after hours. For example, King's Dominion, they keep us reaching out into the community, also just like
and trying to keep the team together. I guess that's
of
really
course,
the key.
ultimately, yes.
Yeah. So I wonder, what is the work day like? I mean, is it longer or short? One of the things we hear about days at sea is that they're very long, you're on for a long time and then off for a bit of time. Is it a sort of a more 9 to 5 scenario in the yard?
The time varies. I don't think it's more about the time. I think it's about the quality of work or what needs to be done during a certain time frame. Some things can only be done at night. And some things can only be done at dawn, before the sun comes up. So it just varies,
And so what are you doing because I'm guessing that you can't really ply the trade for which you're trained while the ship's in dry dock. So what do you do during this time
Well,
frame?
just as the CO, the commanding officer said, is the watermelon is hollow right now. We're just putting the pieces back together.
So you're helping to do all of that?
Everyone has a piece of this watermelon, and we're putting it back together, whether it's painting again, learning about the new equipment, going to schools, just preparing the spaces for
So it's not as if it's all contractors coming in and doing this.
No.
You all are in there doing this as well.
It's our home. It's our ship. We have to put it back together.
I like what you said about it's our home. I don't think a lot of people can necessarily understand what that means, but I suppose when you steam for the length of time you all are out, it does feel like home.
It does, and not only does it feel like home, but we own the home.
Yeah.
And so we have to ensure that, we have a lot of contractors coming on and they're doing things, but we're right there watching them every step of the way to make sure, because once they leave the ship, then we have to operate it.
Right.
And so we have to make sure that things are done properly, because as you know, there's some pretty complicated systems on the ship, and there's a lot of electricity and steam and things that can hurt people if it's not properly managed. And so that's something that we watch quite closely.
I hope you all get some better instructions than half of what comes with what's put. I hope there's words on your instruction sheet. That would be helpful. I wonder, as you think about some of the challenges that you have in terms of maintaining morale, it seems to me that is a leadership challenge. And so do you have a sense, you have 5,000 or so people to keep up with. How do you go about, what sort of structure is in place for you to go about keeping tabs on all those people to see where somebody might be feeling a little bit out of sorts or out of the loop?
Well, a lot of it we rely on our people like Chief Gunny that have 10, 20, 30, 60, 70 people that work for them to make that daily contact with them. And like I said, to address their needs and their morale, we send them out on ships that are deploying to get their training, to keep them up to speed and operationally astute, whereas we rely on people like Chief Gunny to, if there is an issue out there, to elevate it and communicate it up and down so we can go ahead and effectively deal with any problems.
One of the other things the Roosevelt sailors are doing, and they're doing this in schools, it's a very interesting program because it has to do with helping kids understand some of the machinery that's on board the ships. And so this is an opportunity for some of the students of the month to come out and check out some of that machinery.
Basically, when ship's coming in, to salute the ship, we fire off a gun. Say, hey, how you doing? Ship fires around back sometimes, no shells, just powder. Say, hey, how you doing? Say, hey, we're doing fine, and off they go. Well, they're here to learn a little bit about STEM fields, and that's basically mathematics and some science, and learn a little bit about what we do here in the Navy. We're showing them some things that we do to rework the ship and the parts that come over here, and hope that they can take some of this information and apply it to what they hope to do in the future, be it an electrician or a welder or even a pediatrician.
If something wrong with the breaker, you can't operate this.
You have to put on a mask that protects your eyes, because if you don't use it, when you use the fire to melt it, you can hurt your eyes.
When you're welding, the helmet, it has a blue screen. Then when it's welding, the flame turns green and the screen goes black. Then when they stop welding, the screens go back to blue.
Is this something you think you might be interested in doing when you get older?
Yes.
It gets them out of the school and gets some tactile touch, because kids respond so well to getting their hands on something and making it more real for them than just have someone talk and explain it to them all day in the classroom. It's good to get them out of the classroom into the real world and give them some sort of idea and get them excited about it, so that hopefully when they go back to the classroom, it's like, well, this is what I want to do, and I have to do good in this classroom to get to that point at some point in the future.
Well, it's so terrific, that connection between the classroom and the workplace. It was interesting to me watching them do the welding and what they were doing, because we're aware that certainly in the ship industry, the shipbuilding industry, maintenance or repair industry, there's a real serious problem now with the aging of the workforce and the numbers of particularly folks who do things like welding and that sort of thing that are beginning to retire. So it occurs to me this is a great opportunity to introduce young people to a pretty lucrative career as well.
It is. Not only industrial type stuff, but also anything that has to do with science, technology, engineering, or mathematics, STEM. It's programs that, as leadership, we know are critical to operating technologically advanced systems such as an aircraft carrier, aircraft.
Especially that engineering piece.
I mean, even your cell phone these days. Just to have that basic understanding that you can maybe then open the door to a different career path down the road, something that will be in demand by industry and the services as we move into the future.
I was talking to some educators who were saying that we certainly have issues with science and technology and math, but it's that the engineering that's the real critical piece where all of this kind of comes together.
I'm an engineer by trade.
Well, seeing that, then, preaching to the choir here.
It's one of those things that engineering is difficult because just like setting a goal and achieving it, engineering takes a long time. I mean, you need the basis in science, you need the basis in mathematics, you sort of need everything and bring it all together and go forward, and then learn how to apply it. How do I do this? And so it's sort of long-term problem solving, and it's something that if we introduce it at a young age, hopefully the kids will benefit from it. We introduce our sailors to it, obviously, cryptology and everything. They get introduced to it, and they move forward, and it's pretty awesome what they do once they're empowered and they learn how to move that ball forward.
I want to ask you about that, Chief, because we were talking about this issue of empowerment, and it seems to me that when you're a young person and you come into the service and you're, I'll be honest, I was on a carrier. The older I get, the younger they look. I thought they were all 10 years old. I couldn't believe it. But, if you think about being 18, 19, 20 years old coming on these ships, boy, that issue of the building of confidence must be huge.
That's why they initially just let you know that this is take ownership for what you do, or ownership for your equipment, ownership for your area, your space, you know. And our commanding officer always tells us that every thought matters to him. You know,
every thought,
every idea. He listens, he seeks, he asks. You know, he's always checking the pulse, always wants to know a better way, a quicker way. You know, and he's constantly. I think bi-weekly now he has a forum with the entire crew, and he asks questions, and there's no time limit until the last question is asked. You know, he wants to know. So I think that's what gives the crew of Theodore Roosevelt that sense of empowerment, because we know that our leader is listening. He wants to know, and he wants to know how we can make things different.
Isn't it interesting, too, to look at the issue of ownership? And one of the things I just think is so intriguing, and it's very different about the military, is when you talk to people in the military, particularly people in command, they'll say, my ship, my this, my that, whatever it is. And at first, as a civilian, you think, hold up a minute, that's not yours. I helped pay for that. That's ours. But when you talk to them a little bit more about it, you understand what that's about. It's about taking ownership and responsibility. It seems to me. It's just sort of an interesting approach. Would you agree with that? I mean, you all do that a lot. My plane, my ship.
Well, I try not to use the words "my" or "I" very often because,
but you know what I'm talking about, right?
I understand fully, but I do consider it my ship. And when things go wrong with it, you know, you feel hurt or let down, or maybe what could I have done better? And so you always go back in retrospect and look, dissect what has gone wrong and figure out how can we stop that.
So some people have written some very interesting things lately about leadership, and particularly whether some of those military leadership lessons are transferable into the private sector. I mean, it seems to me when you're talking about taking command and taking responsibility and accountability for where you are, we've just been through a period in the country where some folks didn't do that, and I wonder, what of those skills do you find or do you think might be transferable to the private sector, or are they just two entirely different animals?
No, I think it's totally transferable. I would say one thing we've already talked about is having a sound technological base.
Yes.
So that's very transferable. I could talk to anybody just about any matter. Whether it's tsunamis or whatnot. I pretty much have a good technological base. But I think the bigger part you learn is how to communicate with people. Across the spectrum. Whether you're talking to a peer, a chief, a young sailor. There's a whole diverse group on an aircraft carrier. And you need to learn how to take each one of their points of view into account. Know your audience, know who you're speaking to, and most important, know how to listen. And then that's what leadership's all about, is listening and taking action, not just sitting there and letting events overcome you.
I just think this issue of leadership is a very interesting one. And sometimes people, certainly in the civilian sector, make a decision you think, what were you thinking? How in the world did you think it was a good idea to take a raise when none of your people were? Or these kinds of things that just seem so basic and elementary. And it occurs to me that some of these lessons we think are common, maybe they aren't so common. I don't know.
As a commanding officer of a fairly large organization, there's two things I pay a lot of attention to. One is precedent. So your message is always very consistent. That everybody knows where you're coming from. That before something even happens, they know where I'm going to come down on it. That's very, very important. And the other thing is, aside from communicating, which is also very, very important, is just being able to, make contact with the sailors. And that's through the chiefs. And that's something. If you don't have them on your side, then you might as well just isolate yourself and sit in the room.
I have heard that said from time to time.
And so that's where you got to stay in touch with them and encourage that communication.
Well, I want to thank both of you for being with us today and for all the good work you're doing. And I wish you a short time in the yard. Now, when do you come out of the yard?
About 19 months from now.
19?
So,
okay.
Not that I'm counting the days.
We are a little bit more than halfway through, so maybe we'll get a chance to talk again before you get out. That would be fun indeed. But thanks to both of you for being with us.
It's wonderful, Kat. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I'll be back in just a moment with a final thought. Was it something we said? A few weeks back, we reported that our friend and roundtable colleague Kimball Payne would no longer be part of this broadcast because he's hung up his reporter's notebook and joined a financial services firm. Now comes word that our friend and roundtable colleague Christina Knuckles is leaving the Virginian Pilot, where she has served on the editorial page since 2007. It's great news for Christina and great news for readers in the Roanoke Valley, because Christina will become the editor of the Roanoke Times editorial page at the end of the month. One of the aspects of Christina's reporting I've particularly appreciated is her ability to show us the human side of the people who represent us. People like the very conservative delegate Bob Marshall, who carries a camera with him and takes pictures of those who visit the Capitol so that they'll have something by which to remember the moment. It was Christina whose profile of Delegate Marshall revealed the reason he carries a camera. His son was killed in a car accident at the age of 16, and that's when he decided to record family moments because, he says, you never know when you won't be able to. Christina holds a master's degree from Ohio University, and it's a bit of a homecoming because she worked for 4 years at the Roanoke Times as a reporter. Debbie Mead, who is the publisher and president of the Roanoke Times, said, Christina has a deep understanding of the Commonwealth and is recognized as a voice of integrity in the editorial field. We couldn't have said it better ourselves. Congratulations, Christina, and don't be a stranger. Remember to watch this program again or any of our past broadcasts. You can visit our website. That's whatmatters.tv, and that's where you'll find any number of ways to get in touch with us. And I hope you'll join us as a fan on Facebook as well. On the radio, for more local talk, I hope you'll join us for Hearsay. That's on 89.5 WHRV FM. We're live each weekday at noon, and we'll take your calls there. Thanks again for watching. I'm Kathy Lewis. We'll see you next time for another look at what matters.
Thank you.